The 90s were a time of constantly advancing graphical technology and mechanical development, and Capcom committed themselves towards releasing high-quality games year by year. Street Fighter II was core to their release schedule in the early 90s, as they were able to launch a new version year on year to acclaimed success. In 1992, Street Fighter II Turbo came out, adding speed and extra balancing to the SF2 core game design framework. But in 1993, Capcom Japan regressed, stumbled even with their release of Super Street Fighter II: The New Challengers. At the time, this game's roster of 16 playable fighters made it one of the largest, and thereby most content-rich, fighting games on the market, yet it didn't manage to maintain Capcom's audience from Turbo wholesale. What happened? You're watching Rayl Deal Games, and today, I'm sharing my thoughts on Super Street Fighter II, the game that was ignored to the sands of time despite the fact that it wasn't a financial failure. I went into this game with one question on my mind: is Super Street Fighter II as much of a letdown as I've been led to believe? In the videos I've watched on YouTube over the past 10 years, Super Street Fighter II is often hand-waved away as being the black sheep of the SF2 series of games, yet the game isn't bad. This isn't a Mega Man X6 or X7 situation where Capcom really lost the plot on basic good game design. No, Super Street Fighter II is fun, very much so. However, Capcom chose not to meet the request of their own fanbase following Turbo. As I said in my Turbo review last week, that game was mainly made for the Western markets as a way of responding to the Rainbow Edition that was being passed around at the time. This allowed Capcom to dip their hands into the market of people interested in the higher game speed the Rainbow Edition added, while also meeting the market demands those modified arcade chipboards created. Despite seeing that success, it is interesting to me that Capcom would decide to slow down SF2's gameplay for the next proper release, Super Street Fighter II. Capcom's new Super S2 chipboard allowed them to achieve higher fidelity graphics, necessitating the redrawing of their established SF2 sprite work, the end result of which pushes SF2 forward while also being recognizably a part of the same lineage of editions. This shows me that Capcom wasn't just focused on milking SF2 the way they're often accused of, via retrospective lenses. DLC wasn't possible at the time, so the only way to release a modification and balance change to SF2 was via a whole new game, and the fact that Capcom redid all of their assets when they very well could have gotten away with just the 4 additional characters demonstrates how in tune with the market they were. So what were they thinking? Why would they see the interest and love of Turbo players and revert the design of SF2 back to something more in line with Champion Edition or World Warrior? And I think the answer comes down to a fundamental disagreement between Capcom's Eastern-centered creation philosophy and the arcade interests of the West. With Super Street Fighter II, Capcom technically made the mechanical depth of their SF2 skeleton better, adding moves for every character and implementing nerfs to well-known broken strategies. This wasn't enough to change the public perception of Super Street Fighter II in the West, however, because of the distinct lack of Turbo's iconic movement. This is why Capcom would cave to the cries of the market by releasing Super Street Fighter II Turbo the following year. Just like every video game developer in the history of the medium, Capcom has never wanted to make a bad game, and so Super Street Fighter II in a lot of ways represents what Capcom believed to be the better game design for their style of fighter. I respect Capcom for sticking to their guns and releasing what they thought would be the better fighting game, but I also respect their decision to modify their original vision to match what their fans wanted. I really want to reiterate that I don't find Super Street Fighter II to be a bad game after having played it for the first time this year. In fact, I understand Capcom's interest with pursuing the more classic, slow, and methodical style of fighting present in World Warrior and Champion Edition over Turbo, and Super Street Fighter II really does improve upon the formula in a lot of cool ways. Starting out, the change to the Attract mode is a marked improvement. Ryu looks incredibly detailed in this, and the sprite work Capcom did here would only be trumped by their later work. Capcom were just in a league all their own when it came to sprite-based art back then, and I would even say that their older stuff still trumps what modern indie developers can do now. Super Street Fighter II isn't just a prettier face though, as Capcom added 4 new playable characters: Cammy, T-Hawk, DJ, and Fei Long, each with their own unique moveset. This makes Super Street Fighter II one of the most varied fighters available in the market back in '93, and they wouldn't be outdone for quite some time indeed. In addition to this, each of these characters have their own music and stages, with Cammy's stage being a particular standout. My first thought upon seeing the stage for the first time was of Darkroot Basin in the first Dark Souls. This specific frame reminded me of a brighter, more upbeat version of the battlements the player fights the Moonlight Butterfly opponent upon. This is by far and away my favorite Street Fighter stage now because the Aura Borealis type effect in the background is simply gorgeous and accentuates the center focus of SF's fighting framework. In addition to this, all, or at least nearly all, voice lines in the game have been re-recorded at higher quality. In fact, several parts about the sound design of the previous SF2 games I wasn't a big fan of, such as Blanca's victory yelp and the headache-inducing elephant trumpets on Dhalsim's stage, are changed in ways that make them more pleasant. Elephants are my favorite animals, but I would have to mute the game whenever I was playing against Dhalsim, simply because of the way they just don't sound good in World Warrior Champion Edition or Turbo. The graphics, art direction, breadth of content, and sound design are not the only improvements Super Street Fighter 2 made to the SF2 formula, as certain gameplay elements have been balanced and otherwise improved. One thing I noticed in my playthroughs of Turbo is the way in which the CPU just couldn't deal with Honda's 100-hand slap while I was simultaneously moving him. This oversight is corrected in Super, as the CPU can and will definitely counter this strategy if it's not employed in a clever or timely way. This is something I definitely wanted to see Capcom change in future revisions, because it was definitely too easy to roll credits in Turbo with this strat. Beyond this, I like the feel of each character a bit better than their previous iterations in terms of how their moves function and how their combos feel to link together. All of that being said, none of what I've talked about so far matters when the speed of Super is considered. There's no beating around the bush. This game is slow as sin, or at least it feels that way after coming directly from Turbo. It's kind of crazy how much Turbo changed my tolerance for the speed of SF2's previous releases, as Super really is a continuation of that classic formula. It's just that it's a continuation to the point of fault, and as such, I'm not remotely surprised Super is the game in the SF2 lineage that gets played the least these days. There's merits to playing World Warrior, as it is the first game in the SF2 line and is unique as a result. Champion Edition has PvP value even if the PvE in the game is not good in my opinion. Turbo takes that formula and speeds it up in a way that is crazy enjoyable, and Super does a lot of good to make SF2 prettier, more content rich, and pleasant on the ears. If Super Turbo didn't exist, I wouldn't be shocked to see more people play and enjoy Super in a retrospective fashion, but because it was made obsolete just 1 year after its release, Super lives in the shadow of every other SF2 game these days. It's not a bad game though, and I would recommend it to those of you that want to do as I've done. To those of you who do want to try every iteration of SF2 separately, the game may not be super, but it is a good game nonetheless and represents Capcom's original vision for SF2 quite well. And that's the video, my guys. What do you think of Super Street Fighter 2? Let's discuss the game in the comments below, and while you're there, smash that like button and subscribe. Ringing the notification bell is the only way to ensure you don't miss out on my Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo review next Friday and all of my future gaming creations. I make new gaming videos every single week after all, and if you have a moment right now, consider checking out some of my other work. Regardless of what you choose to do, thank you for keeping it real with Rayl Deal Games. Have an awesome day, my friend.